gamers. Welcome back to EPG-Every Platform Gamer, the channel where we cover gaming news and do deep dives across PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo, PC, all of it. Star Fox was born out of a convergence between creative ambition and technical experimentation, led by Shigeru Miyamoto and Nintendo's collaboration with the British developer Argonaut Software. At the time, Nintendo had dominated 2D gaming, but the early 1990s were beginning to shift towards three-dimensional experiences. Miyamoto's goal was not simply to follow that trend, but to define it on Nintendo's own terms. The conceptual spark behind Star Fox came from Miyamoto's personal experiences in Kyoto. His visits to the Fushima Inari Shrine, with its long corridors of torii gates, inspired the idea of flying through structured pathways in a 3D space. This influence translated directly into the on-rails gameplay systems, where players guide Fox McCloud's R-Wing through tunnel-like environments filled with enemies and branching paths. However, the ambition of true 3D gameplay exceeded the capabilities of the Super Nintendo hardware. This limitation led to one of the most important technical partnerships in gaming history. Argonaut Software developed the Super Effects chip, a coprocessor placed directly in the game cartridge to handle 3D polygon rendering. The chip effectively transformed the SNES into a system capable of early 3D graphics, enabling Star Fox to become one of the first console games to render fully polygonal environments. The creation of Star Fox is therefore inseparable from its technology. It was not just a game, but a proof of concept for hardware-accelerated 3D gaming in the home, predating the industry-wide transition that would define the late 1990s. The original Star Fox on the Super Nintendo stands as a landmark title in gaming history. Released in 1993, it introduced players to Fox McCloud and his team defending the Lilac system from Andros, establishing the core narrative framework that would persist across nearly every entry in the series. The graphics were revolutionary, but also deeply constrained. The Super Effects chip allowed flat-shaded polygonal ships and environments which at the time felt futuristic and unprecedented. Yet viewed today, these visuals were extremely primitive, with low frame rates and minimal texture detail. Still, the art design cleverly used bold shapes and distinctive silhouettes to make ships and enemies readable despite the limitations. Musically, the soundtrack composed by Hajime Hirasawa balanced simple electronic tones with strong melodic identity, giving each level a distinct personality. The sound design also experimented with digitized voices, which were heavily compressed but memorable in their robotic delivery. The game's release marked the beginning of the franchise, but it would be followed by a significant gap. Although a sequel, Star Fox 2, was completed, it was ultimately delayed and shelved in favor of developing a more impressive successor on Nintendo's next console. Released 4 years later, Star Fox 64 represented both a sequel and a soft reboot, refining nearly every element of the original. Graphically, the shift to the Nintendo 64 allowed for smoother polygons, better frame rates, and more detailed environments. The art direction preserved the sci-fi aesthetic but added a cinematic presentation with dynamic camera movements and scripted sequences. One of the game's defining innovations was its fully voiced dialogue, giving personality to characters like Falco and Slippy and Peppy. It also introduced the Rumble Pack, marking the first Nintendo console game to feature force feedback. The music expanded into a more orchestral and heroic style, becoming one of the most recognizable soundtracks in the series. Combined with branching paths and replayable missions, Star Fox 64 is widely regarded as the peak of the franchise. Significantly, this game arrived after a 4-year gap, and it will again set expectations that future entries struggled to meet. Star Fox Adventures is one of the most controversial titles in the franchise. Released 5 years after Star Fox 64, it marked a dramatic tonal and gameplay shift. Developed by Rare, the game originated as an unrelated project called Dinosaur Planet before being merged with the Star Fox universe at Miyamoto's suggestion. This resulted in a hybrid design that mixed the Legend of Zelda style exploration with occasional R-Wing flight sections. Visually, the game was a showcase for the GameCube's power. Its environments were lush, highly detailed, and far beyond anything seen in earlier Star Fox titles. Character designs were also significantly redesigned, giving them a more realistic and expressive look. The music music, composed by David Wise and others, leaned toward atmospheric world-building rather than arcade intensity, reinforcing the adventure tone. However, the departure from traditional gameplay divided fans. The long gap between releases and the shift in direction contributed to a sense that the series has lost its identity. 3 years after the adventure, Star Fox Assault attempted to return to the series' roots while still incorporating new mechanics. Developed by Namco, Assault blended on-rails flight, free flight sections, and on-foot combat, creating a more varied but less focused experience. Graphically, the game was solid but not groundbreaking compared to the other GameCube titles. The art design re-emphasized military sci-fi aesthetics, moving away from fantasy elements of adventure. The soundtrack returned to a more orchestral style, reinforcing the epic scale of space battles. Despite its ambitions, Assault struggled to match the impact of Star Fox 64, and its mixed reception continued the uncertainty surrounding the franchise. Released just 1 year after Assault, Star Fox Command took the series in a radically different direction. Designed for the Nintendo DS, the game introduced a strategic map-based structure where players plotted routes using the touchscreen. This dramatically changed the pacing, blending strategy with action. Visually, the game displayed impressive 3D graphics for a handheld system, but naturally lacked the fidelity of home console entries. The art design maintained the established aesthetic while adapting to the DS's limitations. The music adapted to shorter gameplay sessions, focusing on concise, looping tracks that supported the game's mission-based structure. While innovative, Command further distanced the series from its arcade roots, and after its release, the franchise entered one of its longest dormant periods. After a 5-year gap, Star Fox returned in the form of a remake rather than a new game. Star Fox 64 3D updated the original, improved textures, enhanced models, and stereoscopic 3D effect. The art direction remained faithful, while the music was remastered with high-quality audio. This release highlighted a recurring pattern. Instead of pushing forward, the series often relied on revisiting its most successful entry. Another 5-year gap led to Star Fox Zero, developed in collaboration with Platinum Games. Zero retold the Star Fox 64 story yet again, introducing motion controls and dual-screen gameplay using the Wii U gamepad. Graphically, it modernized the visuals but retained a stylized look rather than photorealism. The soundtrack reinterpreted classic themes, blending nostalgia with modern arrangements. However, the control scheme proved divisive, overshadowing the game's strengths. Star Fox Guard, released alongside it, was a smaller experimental title focused on defense gameplay, further demonstrating Nintendo's willingness to experiment but also its lack of clear direction for the series. Although developed in the 1990s, Star Fox 2 was only officially released in 2017. The game introduced free-roaming gameplay and strategic elements that would influence later entries like Command. Graphically, it pushed the Super FX chip further, but its original cancellation reflected Nintendo's shift toward the more powerful Nintendo 64. One of the defining aspects of the Star Fox series is its consistent release schedule. Unlike Mario or Zelda, which received frequent entries, Star Fox has often gone years without a new title. There were gaps of 4 years, from 1993 to 1997, 5 years, 1997 to 2002, and even nearly a decade between Star Fox Zero, which released in 2016, and then the next major release. These gaps have contributed to the franchise's identity crisis. Each new entry often tries something different, preventing a consistent evolution of gameplay and style. The upcoming Star Fox remake for Nintendo Switch 2 represents the most significant moment for the franchise in over a decade. Announced for release on the 25th of June 2026, it is a full ground-up remake of Star Fox 64 rather than a simple remaster. The graphics are receiving a complete overhaul, featuring modern lighting, detailed character models, and fully rebuilt environments. This shift brings the series closer to cinematic presentation with more expressive animations and visual storytelling. The music is also being reworked into a full orchestral soundtrack, replacing the original synthesized audio and enhancing the emotional tone of the game. Narratively, the remake expands on the original story with new cutscenes, additional dialogue, and even a prologue mission focusing on Fox's father, James McCloud. This suggests a deeper exploration of the series' lore than ever before. Gameplay improvements include refined controls, online multiplayer modes, and new challenge systems. The inclusion of these features indicates Nintendo's intention to modernize modernize the series while retaining its core identity. Perhaps most importantly, this remake appears to position Star Fox as a soft reboot, aiming to reintroduce the franchise to a new generation while satisfying long-time fans. Star Fox remains one of Nintendo's most fascinating franchises. It began as a technological breakthrough and evolved into a series defined by experimentation. Each entry reflects a different philosophy: arcade shooter, adventure game, strategy hybrid, often at the cost of consistency. Yet at its best, Star Fox captures something unique: fast-paced cinematic space combat combined with memorable characters and a distinctive universe. The upcoming Switch 2 remake may finally unify the series' strengths, offering a clear direction for the first time in decades. If it succeeds, Star Fox may not just return, but it may finally realize the potential it's carried since 1993. Thanks for joining us for another video and for a deep dive of the Star Fox series. Look out for our next video as we review Star Fox on the Nintendo Switch 2. We're excited to see the direction Nintendo goes. Whilst it's an old game being remade, as it sticks to the core gameplay developed by Shigeru Miyamoto, we know it's sure to be a special one. And remember to game anywhere and everywhere.